I learned how to drive in a 1968 green clunkmobile. But I learned how to drive a stick shift in a red Camaro. My dad bought a red sports car, a Camaro, when he was in his 40s and I was like 19 or 20. So that was the car on which I learned to drive a stick shift. Let me tell you, I loved that. Now, there is a connection between today's readings from the Bible and a stick shift, really. Our texts today are about forgiveness. And I think that forgiveness involves a stick shift rather than an automatic transmission like most people drive. The gospel is the good news of God in Christ. And I believe that this gospel involves a stick shift rather than an automatic transmission. The gospel offers forgiveness to all of us when we need it. God knows we need it a lot, but we may not know that we need it. Now, my liturgy professor back in seminary was teaching us about the Book of Common Prayer, those red books in your pews that we use all the time. And we came to a liturgy which is not used very often. It's called the Reconciliation of a Penitent. Some people call it private confession. Now, my professor said this. Here's what most Episcopalians seem to think about having this service in our prayer books if they know it's there. They seem to think something like this. I'm so glad we have this ceremony for the private confession in our prayer book. And if I ever do commit a sin, I will be sure to use it. God knows we need forgiveness almost all the time, but we may not know that we need it. I've been reading a lot of books on psychology lately just for fun, and I've learned that research indicates that human beings have pretty good systems for justifying themselves and feeling that they're right pretty much all the time. My favorite book title along these lines is this one, Mistakes Were Made, But Not By Me. We usually think that we're doing pretty well in general and we don't often need forgiveness, but God knows that we do. Forgiveness, however, is not automatic. Forgiveness is like a manual transmission, a stick shift. It's not automatic. It doesn't just happen. You have to shift. You have to see your need and you have to ask for it. God offers total forgiveness to everyone, but it doesn't just happen until we ask for it. Take David the king. He was a great man in the Hebrew Scriptures, but David did some pretty sleazy things. Just ask our 9 o'clock Bible study group. They just finished working through David's story in the Old Testament. And as I watched them, I realized they were kind of appalled by this guy. For example, today we hear how it worked out when David seduced another man's wife and got her pregnant. The husband was a foot soldier in David's army. And David tried some things to cover it up, didn't work. So then David the king ordered this soldier's commanding officer to make sure that this foot soldier was accidentally killed in battle. I mean, it was almost a mob thing. Make him an offer he can't refuse, you know? And then the prophet Nathan uncovered David's sin and came and used a story that seemed to be innocuous and got David all worked up, but then he accused David. It was a dramatic moment. You are the man, Nathan said. The story says David was forgiven, but not until he acknowledged his sin and repented. And that word repented is the religious term for saying you're sorry and meaning it. By the way, remember that old line? Love means never having to say you're sorry. That is such a crock. That's not true. Love means saying you're sorry a lot. Now then take today's story from Luke's gospel about this woman who repents and even weeps at the feet of Jesus. And she washes his feet with her tears. She dries his feet with her hair. It's a very sensual story. Now, the host for the evening, this Pharisee named Simon, looks down his nose at this woman. We assume Simon is a pretty self-righteous guy. Well, Jesus says this woman, who admittedly is a mess, has been forgiven. But Simon, not so much. Forgiveness is free, but it's not automatic. You have to climb down from your high horse. You have to admit you've done wrong. You have to say you're sorry, and you have to mean that. It's not automatic. It's like a clutch with a stick shift. Now, this past week, we had a sweet funeral for Tommy Crooks. Now, almost 4 years ago now, we had a celebration right here, and I was honored to lead Tommy and her husband, Philip, through the renewal of their wedding vows. And this was 4 years ago, and at that time, they had been married for 70 years. 70 years. And one of our church members was visiting and marveling at their long and successful marriage. And you know what they said? Philip said this: "It takes a lot of forgiveness." And Tommy said this: "It takes a lot of laughter." And you know what? They were both right. Forgiveness and love are all tied up together in the Bible, in every good marriage, and in fact, in every human relationship. You know that the most important 3 words we ever say to one another are the words, "I love you." Well, right after that, in the order, comes 3 other really important words. "I am sorry." And then 3 more. "I forgive you." It's not automatic. It takes a shift. That is what biblical faith is all about. And really, that's what human life is all about.